Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Syracuse Football Postgame, presented by Krause Health. Sorry, I got something in my throat here. Sorry about that, folks. I'm okay now. What a way to start the show. Choking like Syracuse did in certain instances in this game, unfortunately. Syracuse let a major opportunity slip in Death Valley today. There's no question about it. Penalties, play calling in particular, really cost Syracuse in the second half of this football game, a game they controlled through the second half, a game they led 21-10 at halftime, a game they simply let slip through their fingers. Syracuse had every opportunity to knock down a top 5 team, to end what would have been, before Clemson clinched it today, the ACC's longest home winning streak in its history. But it was not meant to be, as Syracuse loses to Clemson 27-21. Let me re-welcome you to Syracuse Football Post Game presented by Krause Health there. Sorry about the little mishap there at the beginning. I had something in my throat to start the show, but you guys should be pretty frustrated about this one. This is not one of those, hey, Syracuse just wasn't on Clemson's level type of thing, or, another close game with Clemson. Syracuse has proven time and again that they can go down to Death Valley at the Carrier Dome, then now JMA Wireless Dome, and stay in games with Clemson. But the result is the same as it's been every single time, except once for Syracuse in this series since they entered the ACC, and that is a loss. Only once has Syracuse beaten Clemson, another close but no cigar opportunity for the Orange here today. Pardon me for one more sec. Let's hit some comments. We'll give you some stats. We'll go through it here and get your thoughts on it. There was a few things, though, we've got to address right away. First of all, what a boneheaded penalty by Elijah Fuentes-Cundiff. Hits the Clemson quarterback. Klubnik had to come in. Syracuse chases DJ Uiagalelei out of the game. 4 turnovers, doing exactly what you need to do from a defensive standpoint in South Bend. They're playing Notre Dame next week in Death Valley against this team, right? But the offense just did not cash in enough of those turnovers. That's one thing. The ACC officials missed an egregious late hit call on Garrett Schrader. I'm not sure how it would have turned things around given how the Syracuse offense was playing, but you cannot call that play on Syracuse. And then right after that, completely miss a late hit. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. for Clemson knocks Garrett Schrader clearly late on the sideline. It was probably a worse call than the one they called on Syracuse on Klubnik for Clemson. No call. Completely egregious, terrific no call by the officials. Sean Tucker had 5 carries in this football game. That is unacceptable. That is inexcusable. I cannot fathom the fact. And he was running the ball well when he had it. I'll be curious what Dino Baber says about this. I know I'm not going to hear what Robert and I says about this because Syracuse assistant coaches don't talk to the media, which is ridiculous, as I've stated time and time again. But the fact that Tucker had 5 carries in this game is just, I cannot process that. So this is a very frustrating day to be a Syracuse football fan. I feel like now that we've seen how this game has played out, that's the only feeling. I don't think you can really come away with this with many positives. I don't think you can come away with this and say, oh, we almost gave it to them. No, it was right there for the taking. And now not only did it cost them a game, but it probably cost them a chance for College Game Day to come. I reported yesterday that College Game Day clearly had Syracuse on their radar screen for next week when Syracuse hosts Notre Dame at the JMA Wireless Dome. That's probably unlikely at this point, seeing how the rest of the college football day plays out and some other choices that game day will have. So let's fly through some of your comments here because they're coming hot and heavy, and we appreciate you those watching live on Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube, the Syracuse Football Facebook page, and on Twitter as well. Just a reminder, we do archive this on YouTube in my recap on syracuse.com and on our social media channel, so you can watch a replay of the show anytime you want. So here we go, flying through some comments here. Sean Tucker was in what? 7 plays? MIA, as Mike says. The time management, conservative coaching, play calling in the second half, terrible. Agree with that. David, can't lose games with a +4 margin, especially against Clemson. You cannot do that. Michael says, if I'm Sean Tucker, I'm upset. Eric, total joke. I hope you roast the coaches on Twitter. I mean, they should be roasted for that. That's an unacceptable coaching performance by that staff in the second half. Cody says, forget Tucker. He gets hurt every run now. Schrader trying to be a hero and failing. That was not pass interference, by the way. You can't say forget Tucker. He was running well. How do you not put Sean Tucker on the field more, particularly when you get a turnover? Not only do you need points, you got to burn clock. How many turnovers did Syracuse get? And I tweeted this during the game. You look up, end of the third quarter, there's like 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. You're like, man, this does not feel well. I tweeted it. I hate to be right about it from a Syracuse standpoint, but it turned out to be right. Came back to burn them because they didn't put any points on the board and they did not burn enough clock in that situation when they had clear control of the game, had momentum, had it all here. You guys are coming fast and furious. I can barely keep up with you. Tucker, 5 rushing attempts. I'm looking at it right here. 5 attempts, 54 yards. That I cannot comprehend that at this point. Just cannot do that. Fernando says 1 questionable out-of-bounds penalty shifted momentum and changed the entire game, and one they didn't call, which at the very least could have given momentum back to Syracuse. So the officials obviously had a tough half there. The call on Syracuse was legit. I'm not saying that wasn't a call that had to be there. It clearly was. And then I didn't even mention Marlowe Wax on, what was it, the next play or the same drive, kind of face rakes Klubnik, the Clemson quarterback. Like, they lost their composure. They lost their heads after controlling the game, having it, and looking like a team that belonged on not only on the field, but belonged like they should have won that game against Clemson. That's a really frustrating way to go down in that situation. I saw somebody mention it here in the comment. Yeah, there it is. Glenn mentioned it here. You know, a big drop by Cooper on a 3rd down that could have kept at least a drive going a little bit more and kept things going for the Orange here. Alford had a great catch, as Jim notes here. Look, the positives in this game were Schrader running the ball in the first half, but Syracuse did not change things up enough play calling wise in the second half. The mob gave you 4 takeaways. Plus, they stopped at the time Uwe Ungagale on a 4th and 2, right? Rob Hanna with the great stop there. Carter with the 90-yard scoop and score. 90-yard fumble return, right? Like, what more can you ask this defense to do to put you in a position to not only win, but to deliver the knockout blow when it's 21-10, 21-10, continues to be 21-10? That's not going to cut it in Death Valley. It was a script that played out exactly the wrong way for Syracuse, but you can't say you didn't see it coming. We all saw it coming. When the third quarter changes to the 4th, that's when Clemson had the momentum from that terrible penalty on the sideline by Syracuse. And like, they're going to score here and get back in this thing and probably take it. And that's exactly what happened. Even on the last drive, a penalty cost Syracuse, a drop cost Syracuse. I mean, it was just one thing after the other in the 4th quarter. And it's a shame because, you know, a lot of people are going to walk away from this saying, I told you Syracuse doesn't belong in this category. You know, they had the eyes of the nation, the ABC noon game. They're going to have it again next week, by the way, guys. It's either going to be ABC or ESPN. It's probably going to be a noon kickoff now instead of 3:30. We'll see how that plays out, because even though Notre Dame isn't having the season they normally do, they're still a desired television entity. So Syracuse will probably put in a good spot there, but didn't come through today. I like what David says here, that all credit to Tony White playing with substantial backups at key positions. That's a great point, David. I mean, Garrett Williams didn't make it on the field today. Marlowe Wax off the field at one point, comes back. Deuce Chestnut, who popped the ball loose on Carter's fumble return, it looked like he had a serious knee injury. The way that his knee came down on the field, I was like, oh, that doesn't look good. I mean, I'm not Dr. Axe, but that looked like some sort of tear or something. He comes back on the field, pops the ball loose, right? You've got Leon Lowry. You've got guys whose names you have not heard a lot of this year coming on the field and making key defensive plays. Kevin Jaboti Jr. comes on the field and gets an 11-yard sack on Klubnik in a key situation, right? So they're going down the roster, 2nd and 3rd level guys stepping up and making plays. The defense did it. it was the offense let him down today, and particularly the offensive play calling. As John notes here, I thought the play calling was terrible. 3rd and 3. Schrader takes a sack when your running back's averaging 10 yards a carry in the game. It's absolutely baffling and it's unacceptable. And look, the Robert and I and Jason Beck have infused this offense with life, with creativity. They deserve a lot of credit for what's happened so far. But if you're asking me about this game, you get an F. You get an F in how you called this game, how you called the second half, how Sean Tucker. Now, they tried to put him in the passing game. It didn't work. And to their credit, they went away from it because Clemson was just shutting down those swing passes. But how does Sean Tucker have 5 carries in a big football game? Just completely unacceptable in this spot. Let's throw some stats at you here. You guys keep up with the comments here, and I'll jump back in there shortly and react to what you're saying here. You guys are doing a great job venting a little bit today. So all told, Clemson with 450 yards on the day, Syracuse with 291 yards, the 10 penalties for 88 yards. And remember, Syracuse came into this game second worst rate in the country in terms of penalties. 10 penalties, 88 yards today. They're averaging 10 penalties a game. That could bump them back to the worst rate in the country. They've been kind of going back and forth with Houston on that. We'll see. Clemson had 6 penalties for 50 yards, 27 first downs for the Tigers to Syracuse's 17. The Orange were 3 of 11 on 3rd down today. Clemson, not much better, 5 of 15 in that category. Clemson held the ball for 33 minutes, 54 seconds to Syracuse's 26 minutes and 6 seconds. Clemson had 5 sacks on Schrader. The Orange picked up 2 on both Klubnik and DJ Uiagalelei. 9 tackles for loss. Schrader caught in the backfield a lot. That was working early, but Clemson picked up on that. They adjusted to Schrader tucking and running either on pass attempts or called runs. They adjusted to that. Syracuse didn't adjust to that. Oronde Gadsden Jr. still had a great game. This guy just gets open, makes plays, no matter who they're playing. What an all-world talent he's turned into for Syracuse, unfortunately. He was really the only receiver that made an impact today. 6 catches, 86 yards on the day. Tucker, 5 catches for 18 yards, did have a touchdown in that category. Pena, 4 catches for 14. Cooper, 2 for 27. Alford with that 22-yard catch. They just didn't diversify the passing game enough today. Ultimately, Schrader ended up 18 of 26, 167 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He ran the ball 21 times for 71 yards and a touchdown. And the number I keep coming back to, Tucker, 5 carries, 54 yards, when he's averaging 10 yards a carry. That's just unacceptable that happened for Syracuse today. Uiagalelei, 13 to 21, no pick, no touchdowns, 2 picks. Cade Klubnik comes in, 2 of 4, 19 yards, not much in the passing game because Will Shipley all over the field today. 27 carries, 172 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Phil Moffa running the ball well, 18 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. And by the way, we talked about that during the week. Okay, Will Shipley was going to get his plays. He was going to get his yards. What you do is you key in on one or the other. And they did. They took DJ Uiagalelei out of the game. You had to know, as good as Clemson was, somebody was going to make plays. Shipley did. But Syracuse was surviving it. They were getting the turnovers. They were weathering that storm, right? The offense just let them down. Mike says it here. Dabo versus Dino. Dabo makes in-game adjustments. Dino mismanages the clock and cannot adjust. Guys, that's another one I'm completely puzzled by. Why does Dino Babers let that much time come off the clock in that game? I think it was about 20 to 25 seconds. I'd have to go back and look to be sure. Calls a timeout with 1:33 to go. Clemson kicks a field goal. So great, you get the ball back, but you're just killing yourself. It ultimately didn't matter because Clemson shut down that last drive with an interception, but just the ineptness in that situation. Even Sean McDonough, okay? Now, he's got to be fair on the broadcast, but Sean McDonough, Mr. Syracuse, calls out Dino on the broadcast, and rightfully so calls him out on the broadcast. Yeah, it's about 25 seconds, as you guys are noting here in this situation, right? Even Sean McDonough notes that Tom has the exact number here. Thank you, Tom, for that. 202 to 136. Even McDonough says I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was basically like something that Syracuse fans have been critical of is happening right now. That's just inexplainable to me. call timeout right there. Right there. Give yourself more time. That has happened before. And Dino Babers has actually bragged in the past about his time management and some of the things he's been critical for. So I don't know. It feels like 6 games of frustration is coming out here, and not frustration. Look, this team is bowl eligible. They've got a chance to pick up a big win against Notre Dame. Still some good games left for this team. They'll be mostly on the road, except for Notre Dame and Florida State, which are home. There's a lot of good things happening for this team, but to go into Death Valley and just let a game like this slip out of your hands. It'd be one thing if this was just the back and forth game that I expected. Clemson gets the ball last. They're the better team. Everybody walks away and just says, hell of a game. Instant classic, right? It's quite another to just keep shooting toes off your foot with penalties, with play calls. Frankly, the ACC officials are taking a couple away from you. That pass interference, the last penalty that Syracuse had, the cherry on top of the sundae, Isaiah Johnson, that wasn't a penalty, right? So it felt like there was just a few things working against Syracuse in this game that shouldn't have been. But the biggest thing at the top of the list, guys, they shot themselves squarely in the foot. They lost their composure, the defensive penalties, the turnovers, the play calling, like it all just kind of fell in on them in this situation. So Merritt asked the question here. There's no way they're in the college football playoff. I mean, it's going to be tough because now Clemson's in the driver's seat in the Atlantic Division. They already have a win in hand over Wake Forest. So Wake Forest can't challenge Clemson, be it everybody stays at the level they're at here, because Clemson's got a head-to-head win on them. So Clemson is clearly in the driver's seat to represent the Atlantic in the ACC championship game, the last ACC championship game. That's Atlantic versus Coastal. You know, had Syracuse won, they're in the driver's seat. They got to win over Clemson. Still have Wake Forest to come. You know, when the college football playoff rankings come out, there's Syracuse. Now, the Orange are 14. They'll still be ranked next week. They'll drop a little bit depending on what happens around them a little bit. But there's just so much. They lost more than a football game today. They lost more than a football game. They lost a chance at reputation. They lost a chance to be in that conversation for the playoff, to win the ACC. Still can have a hell of a season. Still can have, a 2018-like season. They're still going to go to a bowl game. We'll see which one it is. But a lot more lost today. A lot more lost than gained, if you ask me. Antonio notes it here. In the third quarter, Syracuse 21-10 over Clemson in Death Valley. Sean Tucker isn't getting the ball in the third quarter. Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to that. You guys keep coming back to that. I can't explain it. I don't know what Dino's saying about it in postgame, but whatever he's saying, he's wrong. I mean, you can't excuse that unless he, takes the L on that one. One penalty changed the whole game, Brent. Sucks. Yeah, you hate to see a penalty change the game either way. And I feel bad for that kid. He's just but when you're on the sideline, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. But I think all we ask for is that these things to be called fairly. If you're going to call that on Syracuse, to watch Jeremiah Trotter Jr. shove Schrader, I mean, he's 3 or 4 steps on the sideline, and the refs do nothing. Just completely miss it. Call the game as evenly as you can. That's all people ask for. And what you start getting is, people on Twitter, maybe you guys have even seen it here. Yeah, Jim, you noted it. They lost College Game Day more than likely as well. So a lot more lost than gained on the field out there for sure. I like Thomas here. He's just like, I'm pretty PO'd right now. I think you feel the same way a lot of Syracuse fans feel right now. But to just let that slip away like that is that's as frustrating as it gets. I really feel for you guys there. I really feel for fans because you can't lose a game like that. You can't lose a situation like that. That's just completely inexcusable. Wayne notes if Syracuse has 26 extra seconds, there's no pressure to force a pass on first with 30 yards to go. I think that's a good point there. Let's see. Andy says it's a loss here, but Syracuse needs winning seasons for better recruiting. As you start thinking about that, and now you start thinking about what the rest of the season will bring, right? Mike finds a silver lining with all the injuries to key players. Syracuse is deep enough to have a chance. That has not been the case in the past. I think that's a fair point. And as we were saying, you start to look ahead now. You got a big one with Notre Dame, likely going to be, if not a sellout, close to a sellout. ABC, ESPN, either noon or 3:30, not with College Game Day, more than likely. I don't think that's going to happen now that Syracuse lost and Game Day's got a couple other choices here. But still, another primetime spot for Syracuse to bounce back from this game. You got Pitt after that. You got Florida State. You got Wake Forest. You got BC coming down the pike. And what will be a pretty big game against Wake Forest as well. I mean, Clemson was the biggest fish in the pond, but Wake Forest is going to be hanging out up there right at the top of the Atlantic Division the rest of the way. So still some opportunities here for this team, but this one's going to sting. I think let's mark the tape on this, guys. You tell me if you agree. I think no matter what this team does the rest of the year, they're going to look back on this and say, darn it, we had that. We had that game. You'd almost rather have a win over Clemson in that spot than whatever bowl game they get, whatever is to come from here. It's going to leave a real dissatisfied feeling in the gut of the Syracuse fan, because even if they finish with 9, 10, 11 wins, whatever it could be, right? In order to truly take a step forward, you got to slay the dragon. You got to beat the team. Almost beating Clemson is, ABC. They're on ABC next week. Almost beating Clemson. Doesn't count. That does not count. You got to slay the dragon. This team has been compared to the 1987 team, and those comparisons will start to slide a little bit. But it was fair to compare this team to 87 in a lot of ways. What they did not match that 87 team did right in the middle of the season. It was game 6 in that case. It was game 7 today. Game 6, 87, they beat Penn State. And after they beat Penn State, they knew anything was possible, and they were just an unstoppable force, right? That schedule, frankly, wasn't as tough as this one is for Syracuse, but they slayed that dragon and left all doubt about who they were. You got to slay this dragon in order to be in that conversation, right? That's going to be the disappointment. That's going to be the thing you look back on and say, man, I would have almost rather have that win than whatever bowl game they get or what's to come. We'll see. I don't want to say that definitively here with 5 games to go in the season here, but that feels like that big fish you've been chasing for years that's just eluded you time after time after time, and you finally get him on the line and you got him halfway on the boat and the line snaps. That's just, that's really frustrating. A few more from you guys here. Another year, another moral victory, as Kevin says here. Oops, sorry, Kevin. Let's get that comment in there. I like that. Here it is. Another year, another moral victory. Not today. We should have won that game. David notes a wide receiver in the end zone on the interception. Let's see. Jim says, I'm not even interested in Dino's post-game nonsense at this point. Honestly, I don't blame you there. There's really nothing he can say about that. Tom says the better team did not win. The team that played and was coached better won. Mike says we still win out and Clemson will get slaughtered no matter who they play in the championship games. That's a fair point. I don't think Clemson's on the level of Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, those teams at the top. I do agree with you there. I think they would have a real tough time in those spots. Brian says he's just joining in from Massachusetts. Defeat snatched from the jaws of victory. The defense is elite. The offensive mistakes and missed opportunities are making life miserable for this team. Blake jumps in to say, good to see you as always, Blake. It'll be interesting to see if they move on from this or they let it affect them going forward. Notre Dame is big next week. Could take a lot. Old man in the sea. There's my guy, Steve, with a great reference as always. The great Stephen North Syracuse, ladies and gentlemen. Dave says, next road game at Pitt, they got to finish. I don't care what happens next week at home in the Dome against Notre Dame. Rob notes that Clemson's defensive line dug in during the third quarter, which ignited their whole defense. It makes the vertical approach more understandable, but we still need to run Tucker more. 5 carries for Sean Tucker. It's not the same number, but remember Ferris Bueller when he calls Ferris his mom and he says, your son has been absent 9 times this semester. 9 times? 9 times. I keep hearing 5 times. 5 times. Ringing in my ears. 5 carries for Sean Tucker. Just stop. Just why? I cannot get over that. Jim says, let's see. Runs and eye directs, back quarterbacks, new special teams coordinator. Dino doesn't have much responsibility. Clock management, he's fallen short on that repeatedly, but a great job by the defense. That's on the head coach. You are exactly right on that. I could not I wish I could put a heart next to that comment, Jim. That's what the head coach does. That's on the coach. I'm not excusing Robert and I. He's been great this year. He dropped the ball in the second half. I mean, that play calling was terrible. Okay. Only giving Tucker 5 carries. Not just that, just other calls, just, not getting other receivers in the mix. There was a couple of drops there, but they just stalled. You didn't feel like that offense walks off that field having thrown everything they have at Clemson. And that's the worst feeling you can have in that situation, right? Michael, Tucker's not going to the transfer portal. He's going to the National Football League. So he will be gone after this year, just not in the way that you think. Aaron says Tucker's hurt. Yeah, he was also averaging 10 yards a carry in this game, right? And he's been hurt all year. So if he's in the game, you use him. I don't think that's an excuse in this situation. So I got to disagree with you there. Jermaine, no, it's got to definitely finish at Pitt and at Wake. That Wake win might make up for it a little bit, but this is the big one. This is the dragon they had to slay. And unfortunately, it was death for the Orange in Death Valley today as Clemson extends its sets its record, ACC home wins, extending its own streak, but now it's a record 38 straight. The Syracuse basketball team went to Florida State last year and knocked off the Seminoles. They would have set an ACC home basketball record for consecutive wins, not to be meant today, not meant to be today for the Orange, I should say, as they fall to Clemson. 27-21 is your final score there. So a couple of notes here. We'll be back Thursday for Orange Weekly on these same channels that you're watching, or later on YouTube. Hope you can check us out then ahead of the Notre Dame game. And then we'll be back. So we don't know kickoff as we speak here for Syracuse and Notre Dame, but we know it'll be either noon or 3:30. So depending what the game time is, we'll be right back with you here on Syracuse Football Postgame presented by Krause Health right afterwards. And I think somebody brought up a great point here in the comments a few minutes ago. How does Syracuse recover from this one? Do they let it sink their battleship, or do they step up and forget about it, flush it, forget it, and get a win over the Irish at what could be another sold-out JMA Wireless Dome next week in Syracuse? Thanks a lot, guys. Have yourself a great rest of your weekend. Okay, we'll be back at it next week here on Syracuse Football Postgame presented by Krause Health.